And I hope we're live. Let me just check the audio. And I hope we're live. Okay. A tiny bit of an echo there, but that's okay. Just checking the audio. Give people a second to tune in. Maybe just share the link some places here. As the title suggests, I am going to be talking about the Manjaro Architect installer, what I think about it, and what I've been trying to do with it. Needless to say, it's a pretty interesting thing. And anyone who knows me knows I don't really. Sometimes I'll go outside of the norms of what a certain tool is to be used for. Is to test it, see what it's capable of. And I will eventually open this up to a live chat. And just gonna check the health of the stream here real quick. And I'll also talk about what I've been up to lately. Because I did make kind of a significant change on my system, but it's not. Don't go crazy. I didn't distro hop. I'm still on Arch. What I did though was I got rid of my swap partition, and I created a swap file instead. And so I created the swap file, and then I went in and reclaimed the swap space for my root directory, I should say. I was about to say home directory, but it's not. My home directory is mounted to a second hard drive that I have in my system. And so didn't really take that long to move everything. I just edited the fstab to match the tweaks, and then it booted up just fine. Just followed the Arch wiki to create the swap file, and it worked pretty well. But today we're talking about the Manjaro Architect installer. And what do I think about the Manjaro Architect installer? Well, let me just start by saying that it took me a few tries to get it right. First couple times it was a little confusing. And I mean, I guess you could make the argument like it was like my first time installing it, but come on, I install Arch, vanilla Arch, so I mean, following instructions isn't a problem. So a couple times what went wrong. I think I messed with the drives too much. I messed with the partitions. Eventually I got it to work. I installed Manjaro with the i3 window manager on my secondary laptop over here with the Architect installer, and it worked just fine. Booted up into i3 just perfectly fine. The experiment that I'm running here on it right now, and this is a very interesting experiment in my opinion. What I'm doing is I found in the Manjaro repositories the Architect installer. Okay, so I installed it to the system that's installed on the laptop. Okay, and so I got the Manjaro Architect installer on the system itself, and what I'm doing with it is I'm running in a terminal to see if I can use it to install Manjaro directly to a USB stick or to an external hard drive. In this case, it's a USB stick. And the reason I'm attempting this is because it could be a game changer. Honestly, like, I don't want to be a distro hopper and I'll stay on Arch until it breaks, but from what I've seen so far, this Manjaro Architect installer, it is starting to win me over a little bit in that, like, yeah, I don't want to hop, and you could do a similar thing with Arch, with the Arch installer scripts. But in the past, that's had issues for me. So, I mean, if that works, and that's a pretty cool thing that you can do, if you can install an operating system to an external drive or a remote location or whatever without having to boot into a live environment, you know what? That's a pretty impressive thing that you can do. So what made me decide to switch over to a swap file instead of a swap partition? Well, I've been hearing a lot about, or I've been reading a lot about swap files, and I've been hearing in some videos here and there about how it's superior in every single way to a swap partition. I'm just like, well, okay. The problem was that I had already installed Arch with a swap partition, and I don't like to mess with the partition table on an installed system that is my daily driver, especially. But as I was installing the Manjaro Architect, it actually gave me some issues for a swap partition. And it seems to work better with a swap file the Manjaro Architect installer does. Anyway, and so I decided to give it a try on my host system here. Just because sometimes it's to me it's, and this is just me speaking for myself, to me it's easier sometimes to see how something is manually done to understand the concept of what's being done before I let like some installer script do it for me. One of the things I like about the manual vanilla Arch install through the command line is that the commands are clear. They're precise, they're clear, they're exact. And you know exactly what's going on when it's going on. And so to me, if you install a vanilla Arch, you can run Manjaro just fine. But you know what? Some of the options in Manjaro, the Architect installer was kind of confusing for me because I was like, okay, what's this doing? I know this is a part of the Arch install. What's this doing? What's that doing? What's this doing? And I mean, that's one of the problems I have with specifically with like the Debian installer sometimes too, is that sometimes the language that the installers use aren't as clear as I would like it to be. Especially if you're working with like dozens of partitions and hard drives. I mean, sometimes the command line can be a simpler thing to do. But yeah, no, Manjaro Architect has really impressed me so far. I don't know that I will make the switch. I'm not gonna just wipe my Arch install right off the bat. And but I'm not gonna lie, it's tempting. And hey, what are some advantages to running Manjaro over Arch? Well, Manjaro has its own curated repositories. Now, if you go into um, the pacman.conf file, I think it is, where you have this a text file where it has like your config file where you have all the Arch repositories. They're going to have the same names. You're going to have core, community, and extra. Extra, there's 3. You're going to see the same names in the Manjaro file. But, hey William, how you doing? William Armstrong in the house. I'm going to open it up to or I might open it up to an open chat in a bit. Just let some more people come in. So I got a whole 4 people watching right now. I don't expect my channel to blow up. I just come on here to talk about a few things sometimes. But no, like I gave the Manjaro Architect Architect Edition a try, and I'm running an experiment with it to see if it can be used to install a live environment onto a USB stick. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's called a persistent drive, because it's not like an ISO. It's not like you burn like a Manjaro ISO to your USB stick and you boot it in to a live environment. That's not what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to install the entire operating system onto the USB stick. And so, let's say I boot it up, and I boot up from the USB stick, and I create a file, and I save it to the USB stick. Well, I can access that from any computer that I boot it from. And that's what I'm trying to do. And what's interesting about it is I'm trying to install it from the host system without booting into a live environment to install it to the USB stick. And that's, I mean, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, It's just something I'm trying to do to see if it can be done. Because it would be kind of neat if it was possible. There's a similar thing in vanilla Arch called the Arch installer scripts that will do the same, or a similar thing. It installs the scripts so that you can go into a terminal, install Arch from like, let's say I open up a terminal, I can go into the USB drive and install Arch onto it the way I would the host system, but right from my host system, the same way that I would from a live environment. And that to me is like one of those little things that like it just keeps me on Arch. Those little convenient things like that. And you can create like a live environment. And why does that matter? Well, you can create a rescue disk. You can save documents to it. You can create there's a whole host of things you can do with this thing. And like, to be able to sit here and like watch a video while I'm installing an operating system from the terminal, that's pretty no notification. Well, I mean, John, I'm kind of a small channel, so that might have something to do with it. But I have heard that YouTube has been a little wacky with that kind of thing. So I mean, who knows? A lot of factors going into that. Yeah, it's good to be on. Like I said, I can't promise regular content, so like I don't like expect to be like a giant channel or anything like that. But like, I like to come on when I get a chance. And one of the things I did was one of the advantages that I found with a swap file rather than a swap partition is that I can just create the swap file from the terminal. Like, instructions are in the Arch wiki on how to do it. It's not hard. You could delete it and put another one that's a different size, whatever you need, whatever you want. And to be honest, I don't even know why I bother with a swap at all on my system. I got 32 gigs of RAM. Not once have I seen the system touch my swap. So I mean, really, when I installed it, it's like a force of habit for me to make a swap partition. At least at the time when I installed it. Now I think I'm hooked on swap files. Um, um, One of the reasons was because, yeah, the Manjaro Architect installer didn't seem to like swap partitions, and it really, really, really wanted me to make a swap file instead. At least that's what I've got. That's what I got out of it. Oh, see, yeah. Um, See that's why I don't really know, cause like I got 32 gigs of RAM myself, but on the hard drive that I have the operating system on, it only has 240 gigs. So if I make a 32 gigabyte swap file or swap partition, there goes a huge chunk of that drive. And so I only made it 8 gigs. I only made it 8 gigs. I know the formula. I know what they say, but 32 gigs of swap space is ridiculous in my mind. So I mean, eventually I reclaimed that space. I got rid of the swap partition, and I created a swap file instead. And once I edited the fstab, that's important to edit the fstab file in your Etsy folder when you mess with partitions like that. I learned that years ago when I tried dual booting between Arch and Kali, and I put Kali on it, and I didn't edit the fstab. And if you delete a partition that the fstab is going to be looking for, you're going to be hanging on your boot for a while. At least I was, because it's looking for this partition that doesn't exist anymore. Eventually it gives up, but after like 2 minutes or so, and that just gets old. You don't want to do that. You want to make sure you know what you're doing. But yeah, so anybody who knows can correct me, but I think that Manjaro is this what, 2 weeks build challenge or whatever they're doing. I don't know if they have to use the Architect installer, but I chose to give it a shot, and I have to say that Manjaro is kind of winning me over. And one of the reasons that I choose to go with Vanilla Arch for my main system is because I try not to run a distribution that's based on another distribution, if that makes any sense. That's a big reason why a lot of people don't like, let's say, Linux Mint. I have no issues with Linux Mint. Okay, it's a stable operating system. If that's what you need, then that's perfect for you. However, Linux Mint is based on Ubuntu, which is based on Debian. And so you have a distribution, it's based on a distribution, it's based on another distribution. And they seem to be doing it pretty well, but that can get confusing. And so I try to stay as close to the source as I possibly can. That means if I'm installing a system, it's either going to be Arch or Debian or Fedora or SUSE, something that's not based on another system. Ah, yes, I use Arch too, by the way. I use Arch with i3, by the way. That's 2 by the ways. Because by the way, I run Arch, and by the way, I use i3. And I use the Architect installer to install i3 to the my secondary laptop. And I have to say that Manjaro has, at least from what I've seen from the Architect installer, it took me a few tries to get it right. You want to be careful with the disk partitioning and mounting drives, and you're better off to use a swap file than to try to get it to use a swap partition. It didn't seem to like me trying to create a swap partition. However, as it stands, I like what I've seen so far. What happened with base on Arch? Oh, you're on Salient. Everyone's in the Arch family today. Here, let's get some people in here. I'm just gonna copy the link into there. Links in the chat if anybody wants to join. I have to say that Manjaro as a distribution has really been setting itself apart from Arch. Hey, there's Silent himself. We got the Arch family in the house. Well, Ben Fitzpatrick sometimes runs Gentoo. Oh, see, I didn't know that. See, I've been running the same instance of Arch since January of this year. It's been the same install. It hasn't broken on me. I've had a few quirks here and there, but it hasn't crashed on me. It hasn't. I think a lot of the issues I ran into, I think can probably be attributed to NVIDIA being NVIDIA. The reason I went back to i3 is because I had an interesting issue with KDE. It should be William. Yeah, I've made up my mind, John, that if for any reason my Arch system were to break, then if for any reason we'll try it again. If for any reason my Arch system decides that it's gonna break on me, I've already made up my mind that I'm going the Manjaro route. It's because like the advantages that I enjoy with Arch, I can easily get in Manjaro as well. And I think that Manjaro's repositories are somewhat superior to the Arch repositories, and that depends on what somebody would mean by that. What I mean is, I don't care if they sit on a package for 2 weeks. They're still sitting on the GNOME 3.34. From what I understand, Manjaro hasn't gone to 3.34, and I could tell you why. Just from knowing what is going on. I have GNOME installed on this system, and sometimes I log into it, and yeah. But if you look at the Manjaro repositories, they actually have more tools, more packages in the Manjaro repositories than in the Arch repositories. Tools that you won't find in Arch. And so that's a pretty big plus too. Um, Another big plus is that Manjaro became a corporation, which I know the corporations, man, but that means they have the potential to become just as strong a distribution as Ubuntu or OpenSUSE or Fedora, any of these other corporate-backed distributions. Yeah, no, they could use the AUR that they want. Well, what I mean is that in the Manjaro base repository, so like you got the core, extra, community, there are more packages in those repositories that like a vanilla Arch user like myself would have to go into the AUR to get, but they're right in the Manjaro repositories. That's what I mean. And there's even a couple packages I've seen that aren't even available in the AUR, that are available in Manjaro repositories. And so like that's a pretty big plus right there. Pretty big. Like let's say for example, proprietary Broadcom drivers. If you're using vanilla Arch, you have to go into the AUR to get them. However, Manjaro, they come prepackaged in their own repositories, and they'll even try to boot it up through the ISO when you boot it up into a live environment. So like that's another plus. And there's a tool called PackUI that I really like. It's like a ncurses or like something like that. It's like a terminal based package manager for Pacman and AUR and stuff like that. That isn't available in the AUR. So like, I mean, I think that like, I mean, Manjaro's they're setting themselves up to be a very strong distribution. And I mean, I get it, rolling isn't for everybody, but I mean, maybe. I think because if you got a history shows that like if you have like a corporate backed distribution, you know, they become pretty strong, stable distributions, right? Like if you choose this, like Arch isn't going anywhere. Okay, it's community driven to the core, and it's not going anywhere anytime soon. And now Manjaro is based on Arch, which isn't going anywhere. And Manjaro is a corporation now. So Manjaro isn't going anywhere. And so right there you have what I think is like a perfect formula for what I mean, I think, for better or for worse, think what you want about this, but I think that that what the future holds is rolling release. And I don't know if I agree with that 100% that would be the best route to take. But I think Windows has taken that route. Even like Windows 10 is kind of rolling itself, right? Like they said, this is Windows 10 is our last release ever, and they just it seems more like. And one can make the argument that Windows 10, at least for the home users, is more unstable than Arch or Manjaro, because I think that Arch and especially Manjaro, they test the packages a lot more than I think Windows 10, the Microsoft does their packages. And you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I do believe that at one point Microsoft got rid of their beta testers. And so that's what's going on, is they're sending the beta packages to the home users and seeing, okay, it's going to break their system, and they're using home users as lab rats, as beta testers. And so you have a better chance of an update breaking Windows 10 than, I've been running the same installation of Arch since January of last year. Knock on wood, hope nothing happens to it, but I've had a few bugs here and there. But I've never had it wipe my files. I've never had it, eat zip files on me. I've never had it do anything like that. And Manjaro, I think they sit on the packages for an extra 2 weeks. And the little quirks here and there that I run into with Arch is basically, usually it takes the other packages that either depend on it or other dependencies. It takes them a while to update their dependency list. So you have like a dependency, a little bit of a issue there. Then you just ignore the package until it fixes it. And usually the fix, like the 2 or 3 times it's happened to me since January, the fix has come down the pipeline within a few days. Sometimes less than that. And I can't blame them for that because I have the testing repositories enabled. And so, when I'll say this about Manjaro is that definitely a lot of those issues are fixed in 2 weeks. Like, if you're not looking for feature updates, I get that. But the dependency issues are taken care of before they hit Manjaro. At least for the most part. I've never really seen any major issues like that. And like Manjaro, from what I can tell, is holding back GNOME. And you want to know why? I could tell you why, without even reading their forums. I didn't even go to their forums. I could tell you why. I have GNOME installed on my Arch system. Okay, and there's one of the extensions that I use is dash to dock. Okay, when I use GNOME. I regularly use i3, but I have other desktop environments installed on here so I can keep up with the times. The developers for dash to dock have not made a 3.4 version, a 3.34 version for their package. So it doesn't work with 3.34. Now, if you install Manjaro GNOME Edition, one of the extensions it comes with is dash to dock. And so one of the core pieces of your edition is going to break with the update. And so that's more of a testament to how GNOME may not be the best fit for these kinds of things, because you're going to need extensions to make it usable for a new user. But I also had a very interesting issue with KDE. I was running KDE for a while, and I had a very interesting issue where whenever, it didn't happen every single time, but it happened a good portion of the time. If my laptop, my ThinkPad, was in the docking station with the two external monitors, SDDM, the Simple Display Desktop Manager, the KDE's display manager, would just become unresponsive. And I would have to go into a TTY, and I found that if I kill SDDM, it restarts it, and it worked after that. But that's a ridiculous thing to have to do. And another issue I had with KDE was if it was on a display that wasn't my primary display, and I put a YouTube video, let's say, or any video really from any site, in full screen mode, and then take it out of full screen mode, it would glitch, and the image would be all jumbled, and I would have to actually take the browser, pop it out, and then pop it back in to get it to work again. And I never encountered that issue with GNOME, Cinnamon, any other desktop environment, only in KDE. And I didn't even encounter that issue in GNOME, really.
Can you hear me?
I could hear somebody.
That's me.
That's William.
I'm calling in through Google Voice.
Google Voice can go through this? I didn't even know that.
Yes, you can use Google Voice, either your landline phone or cell phone, but a word of warning is that your phone number will be revealed through Jitsi if you do call in through the phone number method. So that's only the word of warning. That's nothing that can be controlled by the user. That's just how it is.
Oh.
But I'm doing it this way instead of having to use the app.
Well, I'm going to go refill my coffee, and I might have to hit the bathroom, but I will be right back if you want to keep the people busy.
Okay, I have some news in regards to.
I'll be right back.
At most, thing Windows 10 news. I'll just start by me getting that information from Google. There is an HP Touchpoint Analytics vulnerability that affects most HP computers, reported by Bleeping Computer. Steam will now allow you to have remote play over the internet from a high-performance machine to a low-end machine. In regards, Samsung has a vulnerability with its 40 million Galaxy phones and Note users. So Samsung and some smartphone manufacturers are having some security vulnerabilities reported. The models that are affected are the Note 10, Galaxy S8, S9, S10, S10e, S10 Plus, S10 5G, Note 9, Note 10, and Note 10 Plus users are all affected by the security vulnerability. Some that are rated, there's 3 that are rated as high, and then all these are critical vulnerabilities, but 3 are rated high, and there are some 21 security issues covered, 17 related to Samsung's One user interface, and 4 concerning Android. Basically, the vulnerabilities involve, it involves a vulnerability that allows, the details are sketchy as the exact technical nature of the vulnerability, but the technical vulnerabilities have been disclosed to protect users. This also involves an IMEI security mechanism. So some of these technical vulnerabilities are not publicly disclosed. Yeah, I'm about to say disclosed. I meant disclosed to avoid issues. So that's one issue. So Samsung devices now have a security problem across millions of Galaxy devices, the newer models. And that's the bad news. So Samsung Galaxy now has a security threat in effect that forces Samsung to put out an update warning. HP has a security vulnerability in its laptops involving the Analytics Touchpoint LPE vulnerability. Affects most HP products, most computers through Hewlett-Packard. AT&T is wanting to sell its Puerto Rico network for $2 billion. And more technical issues. There's new espionage malware found targeting Russian-speaking users in Eastern Europe. Richard Stallman is mentioned by ZDNet. Object to Richard Stallman's continued leadership from the GNU project. And obviously, China to require facial ID for internet and mobile services out in China.
Well, speaking of that, I've been getting these weird calls, like voice. They always leave a voicemail. It sounds like some angry, it sounds like it's in Chinese. It's a woman. It might be a robot. But they sound angry, and they're like yelling at me in Chinese. I looked it up. And this happens like 2 or 3 times a day sometimes to me. This is crazy. It turns out there's like some scam going on where they're trying to target highly populated areas with a lot of like Chinese immigrants, and it turns out it's a scam to make them think that they're in trouble with the Chinese government if they don't pay them money. And
That's what I learned as well. And not only that, there is ransomware. Hackers are now even launching more destructive malware attacks. Beware of the wiper ransomware, the one that wipes out computer databases. So now there's wiper ransomware that can erase computer systems entirely.
well, I mean that's easy. When you find the wiper ransomware, you just say wiper no wiping.
The NotPetya attack is the one that can like erase computer data entirely. That kind of wipes the servers and computers. Like there's also a German wiper, the one that hit ransomware hit organizations across Germany with attacks that didn't encrypt files, but it destroyed. Like this German wiper would just destroy the files, like overwrite them, but it won't encrypt them. It just overwrites over the file to the point where the file is completely lost. So that's called a wiper ransomware that will just keep writing over and over the file until it vanishes to the point where you're kind of going down the river without a paddle. And that can kind of bring businesses to a complete crawl or bring businesses to their knees, causing more problems.
Sorry, I was just laughing at John's comment there.
Oh, and there's a critical
Yeah.
security issue found identified in iTerm 2 as part of Mozilla open source audit. Windows 10 warning for 800 million users. Microsoft is saying install this update first. So basically, there's 800 million users are now in trouble in a world of hurt.
Well, I mean, if only somebody had warned them about running Windows.
Well, this only
I mean,
the only thing is saying that. According to Forbes, there is a security exploit called Complete Control that basically it's called a Complete Control hack attack. I'll have to immediately jump into that to give a little bit of what that does. A complete attack now used to somehow gain control over computers.
Ghost Mirror, I'm not sure. Um, I, I think I remember reading when I installed the Manjaro Architect installer from the Manjaro repositories. It said it was based on something called the Arch Architect installer, and I looked it up. It seems to be a very old, like dead project. It hasn't been touched since 2016. But I went to this website, and it turns out the installer looks almost identical to the Manjaro Architect installer. I haven't really looked at Anarchy, so I mean I wouldn't know if Anarchy has anything similar to it, but um, I think like once I got the hang of the Manjaro Architect installer, it became pretty easy to use. Um, like, I mean, if you've installed Vanilla Arch on yourself by yourself using the wiki, then the Manjaro Architect might be a little confusing at first. But if you do have that understanding of what's going on, then it becomes a little bit easier to interpret what they're trying to do.
Can I jump in for a quick interruption notice? The control hack attack, which is now called Complete Control, it involves a remote access Trojan or a RAT involving a program called NanoCore, which is a remote access Trojan program that is used to gain access to remote access to computers to control Windows machines. And there's an article by Forbes about NanoCore where a cracked version appeared on underground forums where cyber criminals used the NanoCore RAT to control Windows machines mainly. This affects mostly Windows machines, but it's been reported that the Complete Control hack attack is using that NanoCore RAT components to initiate a cyber crook to turn your Windows computer into a remote toy to play with over the net. But scam baiters also use remote access Trojans to mess with computer scammers all the way in India too. So that kind of both crosses the line. Cyber criminals and scam baiters. Some out there, I've already known one who uses a rat to infect scammers over the internet.
Yeah, Ghost Mirror. Like I installed Arch back in January on this system, and it's been running ever since. And the only reason I kept it is because it was one of those things where it's like, I got it working, I got it working. I was like, okay, don't touch it. I was like, okay, don't just leave it alone. Don't mess with it. And it's been running ever since because it was a pain in the butt to get the NVIDIA Optimus and like that kind of stuff working. It's like once I had it working, I was like, okay, I'm not gonna mess with it anymore. But that being said, if anything were to happen to this Arch install, I think that Manjaro has won my heart. Honestly, I honestly do. The Architect installer has impressed me a lot, and I like what Manjaro is doing. And all of the advantages that I would get through Arch, I could get in Manjaro too. Like at least the important ones, like access,
Another note.
like
Oops.
access to the AUR, and you know, no dependency hell in Arch. I mean, that's what kept me on it, was that there are certain things that I found was easier in Arch base and other distributions. For example, like I've never had, up until I used Arch, I've never had every single dependency um like taken care of. Ghost Mirror, I haven't really looked into the base to that issue. I think John brought it up. I think it was John that brought it up. Yeah.
Another note to interject briefly is Chrome and Firefox users now have a problem where there's some malware that can break encryption. So that's another oh. Anything that's Chromium based or Firefox like is at risk.
Well, but that the base issue with Arch, John. Um, I guess they split up the packages or something. Um, Whoa, wait a minute. It doesn't include a kernel or editor anymore in base. Well, did they move it into base devel? Because whenever I install Arch, I installed when it comes to time to packstrap as base, I install base and I install base devel. I install both
I
those
tried
scripts.
I tried to install Arch myself on my own, and it kind of got a little complicated. But I remember the Arch installer framework in 2011. But I tried it on my own and got a full desktop to work fine. I don't understand why you would have a manual Arch install instead of simple buttons on the keyboard like enter, arrow, and things like that that automatically do it for those who are not able to do it on their own. But I've done it manually install myself.
Well, the advantages you get from installing, like, let's say Arch or Gen 2 or something like that, is the learning experience you get from it.
I've done an I've done a Gentoo install with Ben, and he helped me on it. I tried it on my own a long time ago and got it to work. Then I ran a command that accidentally unemerged everything else with it, leaving me with a base command line prompt only. But Ben helped me. Excuse me. Ben helped me and got a working desktop to run just fine.
So let me see what's going on with base. So
My question for y'all is, what do y'all think about Switch to Linux disliking Opera browser after it's being owned by a Chinese company?
I think it's fair to be suspicious of anything that comes from China, given their track record. Um,
But
I mean,
Opera used to be owned by a company in Norway.
well, but the key word is used to be. Here's the thing about the Chinese government, and when I talk about the Chinese, I'm not talking about the Chinese people. I'm talking about the Chinese government that is heavily, heavily, heavily abusing the Chinese people. Um, and what I'm gonna say is this: is that if you're running a business in China, right? Like, if you ever Google this stuff, like seriously, Google what the the communists in China have done to their people, and what they're trying to do to the world. Okay, what they do is if you're in China, they give everybody a what's called a social credit score. Now, you know what that is? That they have cameras literally everywhere, watching everything you do. And they have facial recognition. That's why the protesters in Hong Kong wear masks. Because the cameras have facial recognition. They don't want to, and they'll go to the labor camps and never be seen again.
There we go. But my question about that is, should I be not using apps owned by a Chinese company?
Well, I mean, you could. Like, you just gotta. That's up to you, William. Like, as for me, it's like, I use Chromium as my browser, and I realize that Chrome has issues. I don't trust Google with everything, but everything just seems to work in Chromium. And
I gotta be fair that I have to put my foot down at Switch to Linux. Excuse my language, but Switch needs to stop complaining about stuff. He just needs to stop. It just gets a little too hard a hand when he's saying, "Oh, Opera's owned by Chinese." Well, Opera was a browser that was been around before even Longa got sold to a Chinese consortium.
well, but if China bought them, I mean, here's the thing. Okay, the the Chinese government, if you're a Chinese corporation and you're a business in China, you are beholden to the Chinese government. Okay? You are being controlled by the Chinese government. Now, if you know what the Chinese government is and what they do, then you would know why anybody would be suspicious of anything that comes from China.
Alright, there we go. Now I'm actually working.
Yeah, there he is.
Yeah, my laptop was having connection drops back and forth.
Having stability issues with your Arch system there?
No, oh my god. It's this new wireless card that I bought. It's a Broadcom chip and that sort of thing.
Oh, that's a pain in the... See,
It's
Broadcom
rare. Yeah.
Broadcom is enough to make me run Manjaro. I'll tell you that because if you're running vanilla Arch,
Yeah.
you have to go into the AUR to get the Broadcom chipset drivers. But
Right.
they're available right in the main
Well,
Manjaro repository.
Salient had it working out of the box, but yeah.
I think he's got his own repository too, doesn't he? Or
Yeah,
No.
and I do as well on my distro of Hackman. Yeah.
yeah,
The only thing is I have to update it to include the DXVK and all that kind of thing, as well as the Broadcom and the Broadcom stuff and all that. Now, the trick is with my distro, it has NVIDIA included and the Optimus manual. So,
NVIDIA Optimus is, oh gosh, it's a nightmare. No matter what distro you're running, it's a nightmare.
yeah, that's what my distro aims to fix.
And
Here I am. There's a connectivity issue that caused me to lose the ability to dial in.
That's a drag.
My big question before I missed what Ben said was at Ben complaining about, or me complaining about Switch to Linux, disliking Opera, the fact that they're not owned by the Othello Corporation, formerly known as Opera Software. But Opera was a browser that used to use a Presto layout engine prior to switching to a Chromium engine. But again, there's a lot of hypocrisy in Switch's things, he says. A lot of...
I don't think so. I think that, like, we can't keep living in the past. It's like there are a lot of things out there that used to be good and now they're crap. Well, it doesn't matter what they used to be. What matters is what they are now. And if Opera, I think used to be a pretty good browser. It was pretty. Like, the fact that you can open like split tabs in the window, that was pretty impressive. But if now they're owned by a Chinese company and they're going down that path, and that's something we have to acknowledge. And
But Opera could compress web pages over a slow connection. No other browser can do that.
well, I mean, you can use Opera if you want. No one's saying that you can't.
But my only
Tom is entitled to his opinion. You're entitled to yours.
But my big outcry over to Linux is his complaining could be a little off-putting to people.
Yeah. Well,
I'm not.
Go ahead, William.
I'm not saying switch to Linux is a person that people shouldn't really like. People can choose to watch switch to Linux if they want to or not. But I think Switch might put himself in a position of hate and controversy with outcry from people that may start attacking him over what he's saying. Might.
Yeah.
I don't think he really cares what anybody thinks of him. I mean, I don't either. I mean, the last stream I did, I called Richard Stallman a monster.
Yeah.
That could be controversial. I'm sure there are people who had a problem with me saying that because it's like, well, Richard Stallman did this great thing. And so how dare you criticize him now for something that it's like, well, I mean, what he's saying.
Well, what?
It's like,
I mean, come on.
It's like we can't.
Well, the way I look at it, Benjamin, is that Richard Stallman brought that whole fiasco on himself. I mean, he made a public statement that was totally left field, totally, and I hate to say, but as much of an inventor as he is of, the free software movement and that sort of thing, I think that, sure, he made a good contribution like that, but I'm sorry to say that's all he really ever brought to his life and to the community was the Free Software Foundation, and it was time for him to step down because, honestly, after all the weird stuff he did publicly to, I think he really was just too perverse for a job like that.
I mean, what my point was is that, like, I took a stand for what I thought and what I believed at that moment, and I was honest about what was going on in my head, and that might have made me some enemies, but I think it was Winston Churchill that said, if you have enemies, good, because it means you stood for something in your life. You stood for something that you honestly believed in, and you're gonna make enemies if you do that, no matter who you are, no matter what your opinion is. If you stand for it, you're gonna piss some people off, and that's just the way that life is.
Right.
Well, I'm a little.
Hold on, William. But I think what he did, not just recently, but through his later years as a developer, and being on the Free Software Council, really screwed up his reputation even more than it already was, and pissed off a lot of people. I can't deny that. But I don't know what you guys think about that, but I think...
Well, I mean, I'm not trying to get too far into the weeds with Stallman on this one, but like my point was going back to Tom, right? Like he stands up for what he believes in. He states his opinions. He's honest about what he's thinking, whether it be right or wrong. That's for you to decide. He's gonna make some enemies too, and that's okay. Yeah. Because he's taking a stand, and you have the right to disagree with him, William. Just like you have the right to disagree with me. It's like anybody has the right to disagree with me or anybody else. I mean, that's the thing. So you can use Opera if you want.
I'm not really. No, I'm not furious with Tom. I'm just a little ticked how people can instantly virtually jab at him virtually because he has to realize he's on the internet like the Wild Wild West. People start going after him like probably go after him if he pushed it a little too far. And then what?
That's the nature of the beast. That's the nature of the internet. You're right. It's the Wild Wild West.
I just think that Mr. Switch to Linux should think before he speaks, because if he says the wrong thing, he's putting a target on him.
Well, but what does that mean, saying the wrong thing? Hang on. What does that mean by saying the wrong thing? Because like, if I sit here and I say honestly what I believe, right, Like, that's going to be the wrong thing to half the people that hear. That's going to be the right thing to the other half. And so, like, this is all subjective. This is all subjective. Like, he's stating some facts, right? Like, Opera is owned by a Chinese company now. That's a fact. And he's stating his opinion about that fact. Now, you can disagree with that opinion. You could vehemently disagree with it if you want. That's your right to do so.
Yes, exactly. I mean,
that's the beauty.
Just because he says something that you may not personally agree with doesn't make him a bad guy. I mean, you know, he's got every right to feel how he does, and you do the same. I mean, it's always like I say, William. Certain things in life, you may not agree with, but that doesn't mean they're a bad person.
And I was, I mean, it's like that's the beauty of living in a free country, right? We live in a republic, where our freedom of speech is enshrined in the Constitution. That means that Tom can have an opinion over here, you can have an opinion over here, and we can all get along because we're all adults, right?
Yeah.
But it goes back.
I mean, it's all, you know. That's why the forefathers who invented this country, invented this part of the country, I should say. They all wanted us to be happy. I mean, that's all there is to it.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. What I would say is this, William: if you disagree that much with something that Tom said on one of his videos, make a rebuttal video to it. State your opinions, and let everybody else out here decide. I don't agree with everything that he says. Like, maybe not to the extremes that he does. Like, I definitely think that Facebook is a problem. I definitely think that certain things are issues. But I can't just uproot myself from Facebook. There's a lot of people on there that I need to stay in touch with that won't stay in touch with me any other way. And so, like, while I agree with the premise that Facebook is a problem, it's not as easy as it is, and it's not as easy to de-Googlefy your life when you have like 20,000+ unread emails on your Gmail account that I can't even begin to go through. And so, like, a lot of these things are tremendous undertakings, but I do agree with the premise, because I fell for the Google trap 10 years ago. It's like, ooh, free email, and then I just checked my email for a year.
Am I annoyed with Switch Linux? Yes, partially because he's using a Google product, which is YouTube. But again,
well, you gotta go where the audience is. Yeah. That's the argument on there. You gotta go where the audience is. No one's on BitChute. No one's on, like, I hate to say it, no one's on. See, this is how unknown they are. I can't even remember all the other video.
Yeah, you see, nobody is on an alternate platform. So, as much as Google sucks, I hate to say, there is no better place to watch videos. I mean, every video in the world is on YouTube. That's just the way it is, and unfortunately, I don't think that's going to change.
Yeah.
But my big question is, why would Switch delete his MeWe? Like, what would give him why would he do a thing like that?
Well, he explained it why. He said that it was because they didn't say anything about charging for keeping a page up, and then all of a sudden they changed their thing to say, like, oh, we're going to charge you now. They did change their contract, and the way that he went in the Wayback Machine, and the way that the archives wouldn't show up, that seems a little fishy too. I understand where he's coming from on that one. Okay.
Like, charging as in what? What do you mean by? What do they mean? What does he mean by charge?
You know how you go on Facebook and you can create like a business page for your business?
Yeah.
Okay, to do that on MeWe, they want to charge you $1.99 a month. No.
Like that.
But here's the thing. That's not the issue that Tom had, I think. His issue was that they never said anything about that when he created it. And then they changed the agreement, and now they're trying to push it. All of a sudden, it's like if we start playing chess, right? If I say, well, we're going to play chess, and we're going to play with the classic rules, then all of a sudden I decide, like, the pawns can jump over. We're going to change the rules. The pawns are the most powerful, and I'm going to start It's like, well, wait a minute, you're not going to play with me anymore because I just changed the rules on you in the middle of the game. That's what MeWe did, and so I can understand where he's coming from on that issue.
Right. So they can randomly change things however the heck they want.
And like I think that MeWe's a pretty decent alternative to Facebook. That's my opinion. I still think it's a lot better than Facebook, and I have really no problem shooting them a few bucks here and there to keep them from collecting my data. Right? Like that's the alternative. Right? If you're not paying them, you are the product.
Yeah.
Okay, so that, like, I get why MeWe is doing it, but I also get why Tom has an issue. So that's one of those things where I see both sides of the issue.
Right.
Well, the only thing that
William. So basically, MeWe is a two-sided coin at this point.
Yeah. Like, honestly, if Facebook were to say, like, here, just pay us, like, $1 a month or something, and we won't collect your data, I'd be like, okay, here.
Okay, go ahead.
That's no biggie. That's no biggies. I'd rather give you my money than my data.
Yeah, I'd rather sacrifice $1 a month or a year or whatever than lose my privacy.
It's like,
I don't care.
Like I gave MeWe $2, like $1.99 for their dark theme. Yeah. I have no problem doing that because it.
Yeah. But if they're doing data collection, then that's one reason not to use it. Yeah.
Well, but I don't think MeWe is doing data collection, but like, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think they are, but I think,
they seem serious about privacy, and like that's why they're charging for these other services. They're saying, well, we want to. They need to make their money. They need to keep the lights on. Okay.
But what if MeWe, if that went under since Google Plus is gone, then that kind of leaves people kind of stuck in a jam.
Yeah, they'll be stuck on Facebook or some other website.
Honestly, I don't think MeWe's going anywhere. Like, it seems like it's pretty stable right now. But there's also, I think, what is it called? Minds.com or something?
Yeah.
Like, I haven't really checked that one out, but like, I think one of the problems that you have here is that these big businesses, the big corporations, the Facebooks, the Googles, all these things, they're saying like, okay, this is our platform. We could do whatever we want. If you want to have different rules, create your own platform. And I am a believer in the free market, so I will give them that. But here's where I disagree with them. The smaller companies that try to start up these other platforms, now these big corporations go to the government, lobby them to shut the competition down. All of a sudden, that's not the free market anymore. That's corporatism, and I have a problem with that. Because now they're not just a platform that can do, a private platform that could do whatever they want. They're a giant entity that's trying to squash the competition with the arm of the government, and I have an issue with that. That's not free market. And so I do have an issue with them. However, but I mean, at the end of the day, this is the hand we've been dealt. Okay, so like we can sit here and complain about it all we want, but the reality is going to stay the reality. Like, it's not going to change. Right. YouTube's the biggest platform. YouTube's going to do what they're going to do, and there's nothing that really you or I can do about it. And so,
even me. I mean, as much as YouTube is a huge problematic commodity, it's a commodity that we have to live with. And if we want to do live streaming, if we want to do all these pretty fun things, we're stuck on it. I mean, it's just, it's the biggest place where you can draw stuff in and people will watch. I mean, that's it. That's
exactly. Because if you want to reach an audience, you have to go where the audience is.
Yeah. That's just the nature of the beast. That is how it is.
I mean, that's just what it is.
And, right.
So that means...
As much as Google is an evil thing, it's where everything is these days.
I mean,
and you're not going to turn the entire nearly 6 billion people on the planet onto another search engine. It's just not going to happen.
And like, I try to use DuckDuckGo wherever I can, but I mean,
the problem with DuckDuckGo is the fact that you don't have as good a results as you do through Google. So.
Well, I guess it depends on what you're looking for, because like
Yeah, I mean, depending upon your results, it's going to be what you get.
I think the DuckDuckGo results are less they're less tampered
Oh,
with.
well, what I've looked up is the Opera browser is owned by a Chinese consortium. Parts of it are, but it's not like it's fully owned by a person who, but the person who owns it is Chinese, but is not doing anything sketchy behind the scenes, as far as I can tell.
Well, but
Right.
as far as you can tell, that's the key. That's the key part of that,
Yeah,
isn't
as
it?
far as you can see, yeah. I mean, that's that's really where the line drops. Is where as far as you can tell, that's the one key factor.
Right. Like even like someone like
Mm.
Ben here. Like I can't read a lick of code, but Ben here could read code, and you could have
Yeah.
like thousands of lines of code, and you could miss something. It's like there could be something there that like there are experts on this stuff that can run like netstat on the computer and see if it's connected to any fishy servers and see what is sending back and stuff. I mean, there are ways to investigate this kind of stuff. Um, like QuidsUp is good at that kind of security thing. Like there's a channel
But
called QuidsUp that does
Yeah.
things like that, and I think he's the one that discovered the what Deepin was doing. Remember they were sending like your data back through the software center there. Deepin OS is the Chinese distribution, and there you go. Even their Linux distribution is spyware. So I mean,
Opera, but Opera was distanced. Well, the Othello Corporation, formerly known as Opera Software, had to distance themselves from the Opera browser as much as they've had it for years.
Yeah. Yeah, Opera's been around. I don't even know how long, but yeah, I think it's one of the oldest surviving browsers.
well, Lynx is the oldest.
Yeah, it's one of the older, I should say.
Because I guess Netscape became Firefox, right? But I don't know. Like
Yeah, I mean you've got Link LINKS is a good. It's an old browser, but it still works.
like what I would say is that we can't let the past. The past is no reason to ignore the present. Opera maybe had a good a good history, but like Firefox used to be great too, and it still is. It's still I think the best one that's out there.
Yeah.
But they started taking political stands. They started putting like ads in the browser. They started doing some questionable stuff too. And we have to call, no matter how much we love a project or love certain things, we have to call them out when they mess up, because that's how you keep the product on on the path. It's called constructive criticism sometimes. If you love a project, you have to hold the feet to the fire.
What about? But here's the thing: the Opera Max or Opera Max, formerly owned by Opera, is now sold to Samsung, which is now known as Samsung Max, but it's only compatible with Samsung devices. A data saving app on that note. But Opera also brought in offline file sharing on Opera Mini for Android. Second, the thing here is that Opera Software, the Othello Corporation, had to get rid of Opera browsers from their control because they wanted to distance themselves from it.
Well, I mean that's their decision to do that. And if the product suffers, then I mean, hey, Tax Action, how you doing?
What's
But I doubt that Opera Software, known as the Othello Corporation, would
Yeah,
take back Opera
Yeah,
and
Tax
sold
Action.
out.
We kind of went off into the weeds. I started this out talking about Manjaro Architect and
yeah?
how I switched
It all
out
went off into the little
my swap partition with a swap file instead. And like basically my to summarize my opinions on Manjaro Architect is it won my heart. I like what Manjaro's doing, and I'm not just saying that as an Arch fanboy, right? Like, I don't know about this whole base issue. Um, yeah, Ghost tried to stay on topic too. He was saying that I guess the um I guess that Arch did some questionable things with the base group. Like, you know how when you install Arch, you install the base and base devel, and I guess they split up some of those packages. And like, I don't know. This install of Arch that I have on this system, I installed back in January, and
Yeah.
like it's been updating ever since. I only God knows how many kernels this thing has been through, but uh, so like I don't know what the Arch installation process is like now. Like, it tends to change every now now and again.
But I do miss, on a side note, I do miss the old Opera Mini for Android, and I miss the Opera, the version that used to use a Presto browser engine. But that doesn't mean I don't dislike Opera. I mean, I just don't have a problem with that. I don't think it does any spying or data
Well,
collections.
no, criticism doesn't always mean that you hate something or that you hate someone. Um, if you see your fellow man stumbling and doing something wrong, you let them know so they can get back onto the right path. You're not telling them, hey, you're screwing up to damage them. You're telling them, hey, you're screwing up. Get back on the horse. You're telling them to benefit them. And I think the same thing happens with these projects and stuff. It's like, we don't criticize them to knock them down, right? Like, if I criticize, let's say, Ubuntu, I'm not criticizing Ubuntu to knock it down. I'm criticizing it because it was it was like the first distribution that I ever used, and I don't want to see it fall. I don't want to see it become something that, like, it's like I don't want to see it mess up. I don't want to see it become something that I don't even recognize anymore. So, like, it's just one of those things where it's like people they take these criticisms to heart, and it's like they sometimes they take it personal. It's like, wait a minute. I mean, but like, we have to also be objective with these things too. Like, okay, all of a sudden you're owned by a Chinese company. Well, I mean, okay, let's look at what the Chinese government. Let's take a look at their track record. Now, do we have reason to be suspicious of Chinese products? Yes. Doesn't mean they're all spying on us, but we have reason to doubt, if that makes any sense. There's plenty of reasonable doubt there to say, like, okay, this thing might not be spying on me, but it came from China, so I'm going to assume that it is, and just like stay away from it. Why? Because that's a very safe bet with their track record. And I mean, that's just my opinion. And people can disagree with that. You can disagree with that if you want, but like, I would implore you to do some homework on what the Chinese government really does with its own people and with its products, and just look at its track record. I might have to go, guys, but thanks for jumping in.
All right, Benjamin.
All right, I'll see you guys later.
All right, have a good one.
You too.
Later.
Yeah, sorry for cutting out like that. My girlfriend and son just got home. Gotta go help bring the groceries in. So, see you guys soon. Bye bye.